Hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I am your host, Charlie Murphy, Director of MTCA, that's Musical Theater College Auditions, and today we have got a Leo Ash Evansville kind of show lined up for you. Leo isn't on the show, but Sharla Cowden is, and we get into her school, which is the University of Evansville, and talk a bit about Unifieds in the second half, since she's the national co-coordinator for that. I'm going to be quick with my intro today. I got to go pick up my daughter from daycare. So no sage words, no big events to recap. Though I will say, have you all signed up for a mock? Our September 3rd mock is almost sold out. Jump on that if you want to participate in that one. Of course, at that September 3rd mock, you wouldn't be seeing me because that is the day of my wedding and we are full of Groomzilla energy over here. We're also in the playoffs for the Broadway Softball Show League. So that weird Broadway Show League softball. You understood what I meant. So feel free to come out on Thursday and cheer us on at the beautiful Heckscher ball fields. Also, if you enjoy reading and not just the sound of my beautiful voice, feel free to check out the blog I just wrote. I believe that will be releasing this week. I dove deeper into some of those process over product thoughts that we hit in Lauren's episode, and you'll get to see some different hyphens from me as we hit some writing as well, you know? Speaking of my beautiful voice, I once again do not sound great in this interview. Apologize for that audio quality issue. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. This interview was a few months back, but we're going to work on it and try to give you all the gorgeous sonic experience that you all deserve moving forward. I love you all. I hope you're having a restful and delightful August. And please enjoy this interview with Sharla Cowden from the University of Evansville. Well, we are so excited to be joined by Sharla Cowden of the University of Evansville. Sharla has a BA from Southeastern Oklahoma State University and an MFA from Wayne State. She was a managing director of Connecticut's Hartford Children's Theater. She's worked extensively for 8 seasons with Oklahoma Shakespeare Festival. She also served as the audience development coordinator at the University of Oklahoma School of Drama, and she is now the department chair and managing director at University of Evansville. And we'll also talk about a little special role that Sharla plays as the national co-coordinator for the Unified audition. Evansville is in Evansville, Indiana. They accept about 32 students per class. They offer many degrees, including a BFA in theater performance. Sharla, welcome on the show. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. You were telling us that as we speak, the microbes in the air are coming through. The smoke is somehow
the smoke has arrived in Indiana. So thanks, Canada.
Thanks, Canada. Yeah, it's this good. We can go back to a time in America where we blame everything on Canada.
Yeah,
this feels
sure.
Right. It feels really good. I read that little bio there of what we can find online, but catch us up in terms of anything else that we need to know about you as you sort of arrive at your current position today before we get into Evansville. Any fun facts, interesting paths, stuff that people should know about Sharla?
Sure. Well, I started as an actor, as many of us do, and in college, had a really great professor who was saying, acting is a really tough job, and if you have other skills and talents, and you think you can be happy, maybe you do that, and you leave acting to people who really feel like that is their absolute calling. And I looked around and thought, I like other things. I like the business part of it. And so I ended up getting my MFA in theater management. And after that's when I made the move to Connecticut. And then I actually taught for 6 years at the University of Oklahoma as their audience services person. And then the position at the University of Evansville opened up as the marketing director and the head of their theater management program. So through that, I did that about 16 years, and then for 3 years as managing director. And then I just finished my second year as the department chair and managing director. I still had the theater management program. We have the #1 theater management program in the whole country, actually, which is not a lot of students come out of high school knowing that that's what they want to do. But I always say that I'm looking for people who have kind of the head of a business person, but the heart of an artist. And it's a really great way to be in the profession. There are plenty of jobs out there.
I was just going to say, boy, do you come out marketable if you have one of those jobs.
Absolutely.
A lot of people want to be on stage, not as many people want to be backstage. But
yeah.
This is an impressive list of titles. We're very excited. Let's dive into Evansville a little bit. So, you described a little bit maybe of what a theater management student. I really like that idea of, the head of a business person and the heart of an artist. What do you think about when you think about a student who's just going to join, let's say especially more of our students are performing oriented. If you're looking for an Evansville student, what do they feel like? What feels like a BFA theater performance person
Yeah,
at Evansville?
Evansville has a pretty storied career, starting all the way back in the 60s. Ron Glass was maybe our first kind of famous actor who graduated. And, through the years, we've had lots of really talented performers come through our ranks. And we really didn't start recruiting until 1984. John David Lutz was the long-term department chair. He served for 53 years on the faculty here at Evansville and really kind of built the program. And so I spent many years, recruiting with him. And so really kind of understand what we're looking for. And what we're looking for, we put in our marketing materials, and it's really true, is that we're looking for students who have exceptional talent and outstanding academic ability. And we really weigh those equally. We think maybe the smarter an actor, the more curious they are, the better the actor they are. And so we're looking for students who not only love theater, but also are really interested in our world around us and society, and using theater to also entertain, but also make change and make a difference in the world. And so we look at that. And so when we travel around and auditioning, we'll see probably 2,000 students a year, get applications from about 400. And then, like we said, we're looking for 32 in that first year class. But of those 32, we're really only looking for 16 in performance. So 16 performance, do a quick rundown: 3 in stage management, 3 in theater management, 2 in theater studies, students who know they want to be in theater, they just kind of haven't figured out what they want to do yet. Bring in these 2 people and really let them kind of explore around. 2 in a brand new degree we offer starting this year in directing and dramaturgy, and then 6 in design and technology. So, but let's go back to the performance students. That's kind of the overarching. All of them are smart. All of them are talented in their respective fields. But I think in an actor, we're looking for someone who does really truthful and emotional work, is really grounded, makes real human choices. And, that coupled with, not all of our actors sing. So we do not offer a degree in musical theater. We offer a BFA. We also offer a Bachelor of Science in acting. And that's really different. It's kind of, based because we are a liberal arts and sciences university with conservatory-like training, And so what the BS does is allow a student to explore a secondary interest, whether that's in creative writing, communications, history, political science, but they take the same acting classes on either degree. So it's not as if we separate the BFA actors and the BS actors. Getting to be one of the 16 actors is kind of the hurdle. Once you're here, you actually don't even choose which degree you want to go for until the second semester of your first year. So maybe you get here and you're like, oh, I have to do a BFA. In fact, almost all students come in insisting they have to do a BFA. And by the time we get to them making their choices, our students really end up about 50-50. I always joke with them that there's never going to be a day when you're auditioning for a Broadway role and it comes down to you and another person. And the person's like, well, how will we break this tie? Oh, look, this person has a BFA and this person has a BS.
It's not the letters on the
never
degree.
Going to happen.
Totally. Well, and I think really, kind of instructive of your program, and, we'll get into the granular specifics of what some of those classes are. But even the fact that you call the cohort the 32, it combines them all together, I think does differentiate you from other programs. There's some programs who really, separate. I'll even say I went to Carnegie Mellon, and the way we talk about the actors and the musical theater students together because it's very acting, but we don't count the stage managers and the directors, and it would be a much bigger class, even though of course we do count them as humans in the drama school. So that's an interesting thing. I also enjoy, anytime you get to say BS in acting. Jesse Mueller, who was just on the pod, had a BS in acting. And anytime you get to say, we study and we get a BS in acting, it sounds about right. But let's talk a little bit about some of the BS that you get up to in terms of especially the performers, though. I'd love to hear some of the other degrees too. of those 32 students, what does the curriculum look like? And, as granular as you want to get in terms of how it's different for the BFA versus the BS with the actors, but also then some of the people who are more interested in a broader education. How does that work within the specific course load?
Yeah, well, there are absolutely core classes. There's the theater core that all students take, and what's really great is they do it together. And so, in your first semester, you're pretty much taking all theater classes with your cohort, all 32 of you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're taking survey and analysis of dramatic literature. You're taking an acting class together. We mix everybody up, so there are not we don't separate out non-performance
Right.
majors.
Stage managers and design, all would be together, yeah.
Which is really great,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of let everybody just be where they are, right, in the
Mm-hmm.
class. And then color and design for the theater, costumes and makeup, a theater practicum class, production techniques. And then we're changing a little bit. We did do 2 semesters of theater history, but in our efforts to kind of decolonize theater history, we are kind of structuring that. In fact, I have our theater history teacher who's on sabbatical this semester working up 4 new classes for us. So we're going to do one class in theater history, and then one class in more dramaturgy and more script analysis moving forward, which is really exciting. As far as then for performance majors, we really don't have really fancy titles for any of our classes. The first semester, you're kind of taking acting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yep.
But in the first semester, you're certainly, geared more toward games and freeing the imagination, things like that. You move into a little bit more of scene study in the second semester. In your sophomore year, you're really only taking one acting class in your sophomore year because you're spending half of it studying abroad. So we'll talk about that maybe in a minute. And then more scene study is your sophomore year. Then your junior year, you're moving to classics and Shakespeare. The first semester of your senior year, you're taking an audition techniques class. The first half is in person. The second is all about self-tape, which is really important now. And then in the final semester, you're working on your capstone project, which is devising your own work and presenting your own work so that when you do land in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Atlanta, wherever you land, and someone says, are you working on anything? You do have something you could put together and show people. So we're really excited about that. So, and then of course there are private voice classes. We have a great music conservatory on campus. So you can take a private musical theater class every semester that you're here. Our students are also able to perform both in either women's chorus or in university chorus. And there are scholarships for doing both of those things. And then there's also 2 a cappella groups on campus that were started by theater students over 15 years ago and still exist, which is really great.
You anticipated my exact next question, which is just, for our more of our students, I guess, if they're truly wanting to do nothing but musical theater, they might end up at a different school. But for a lot of our students who are kind of acting/musical theater curious and who like to sing, like to dance, what does that look like? If I wanted to carve out I'm mostly focused on acting, and maybe I'm also interested in some of these broader theater related things, but I do want to keep up some musical skills. Other than the private voice lessons you mentioned, there's a musical theater class. Is there anything dance wise that they'd be able to get?
We really do more movement-based as opposed to dance-based. And so if we have students who are, really good dancers, I'll reference Danny Mefford, who was the choreographer on Kimberly Akimbo and one to Ed Evan Hansen and Bridges of Madison County. And, he took outside dance classes, right? And so some people will continue to take outside dance classes in the community. But mostly our dance classes are based on movement for the action, a movement for the actor. We do have, I have hired an adjunct who's going to be doing some clowning for us this next semester as part of the movement and physical actioning workshops. So we're really excited about kind of that change and getting away from like pretending to do dance in a way. You know what I mean? We're just like, let's just change the class and do what we do. What we do is really great.
Totally makes sense. And so would you say that of the 16, how many of them are, really pursuing the musical theater aspect beyond the acting? I sort of think of like most good acting programs, you're going to be an actor who might have to sing at some point. How much more beyond that, do your students tend to be?
I would say that it's probably 50-50. Amelia McLean, who's is our assistant professor of acting, she always says, there are 50% of the kids in the class who would sing through the entire class if you'd let them. And then there's the other 50% who would like to vomit before they, have to go on and do their general audition and sing. And she says, and I never know who they are until we do auditions, right?
Uh-huh.
And so it really is that kind of like acting focused. And, when I'm talking to students about it, one of the things that how I best try to describe it is that, we're interested in you, helping you create kind of a life in the theater
Mm-hmm.
as an actor, if you will. And so if you want to go to New York and be in a Broadway musical, then, we want you playing the lead. And those leads are being played
Mm-hmm.
by real actors, and
Mm-hmm.
once that musical closes, if you have the acting chops, you can go audition for a play. You can go audition for, you can do voiceovers for animation and
Mm-hmm.
record audiobooks and film and television, and there's not many opportunities for, if we're talking, cruise ships, absolutely have tons of opportunities for young people, but not for 55 and 60-year-olds, right?
Uh-huh.
But you can be in a play when you're 55 and 60.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why we kind of are really hoping that, really looking for students who kind of want, I know I'm a good singer, and what I
Right.
need to do is take classes to be a better singer.
Mm-hmm.
But what I need to work on is acting. And so
Yeah.
that's what I want to spend 4 years doing.
Totally makes sense. So, all right, and you teased us with a sophomore year abroad. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh, right. So we happen to have the #1 study abroad program in the country. And why is because back in 1973, a very nice man bought an entire manor house in England called
Mm.
Harlexton College. And then gave it to the university. And so it's University of Evansville's British campus.
Mm.
And so it's something crazy, like only 5% of American students study abroad.
Yep.
But on the UE campus, 68% study abroad. And in the Department of Theater, 98% study
Ooh.
abroad. And so we've just built it into the sophomore year where we kind of split the class down the middle, and half go the first semester and half go the second semester. And it's designed to be a 4-day class week. So you spend 3 days traveling throughout Europe,
Mm.
seeing theater with your pals, and it's not uncommon for students to be able to see theater in 10 different countries while they're gone that semester. And they just come back changed as people, as
Mm-hmm.
global citizens, and kind of their aesthetic is really different.
And is the curriculum over there still of the 4 days a week? Is it still an acting-based curriculum, or is it more broad
No,
college
in
education?
fact, we insist that it not be, right? We insist that they take a break. And, now listen, they do take Shakespeare from a British professor. It's supposed to be the literature side of Shakespeare, but I
Mm-hmm.
guarantee you somebody's doing a monologue in that class. So I try to pretend that I don't know that, but I do know that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when they kind of, that first semester, as I said, they'll take all theater classes. So when they go to Harleston, they kind of balance out with their general education courses.
Yeah.
And we have found, again, Professor McLean, she says that, she teaches that first semester of sophomore acting to people who have not been to Harlexton. She says she teaches second semester to people who have been to Harlexton. And it is a completely different class.
Huh.
The curriculum is the same, but the way the students approach the material after having that more worldly view
Uh-huh.
about their characters is completely different in the second semester. And I think that's pretty fascinating.
It's super cool, and it leads me right to the broader non-acting, theater education at Evansville. I know you sort of emphasize you want students who are as academic as they are artistically talented. What does that look like in terms of, let's say, especially maybe the distinction between the BFA and the BS? What does it look like in terms of the amount of outside classes? Am I able to get a minor? Do any of your students get double majors? How does that work in terms of
So
these
with
programs?
the BS comes with an associated study, which is like a minor. So let's say you want to do a minor in psychology, and the Department of Psychology then says, fine, then you have to take these 21 hours.
Uh-huh.
But to do an associated study in psychology and sociology, you sit down with your advisor, and between the two of you, you choose the 21 hours. So it's almost like a choose your own adventure
Uh-huh.
associated study. So if it's creative writing, you could pull from the creative writing classes. You could do take the playwriting out of theater. You could do screenwriting, something from communications, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a little bit more flexible degree there. I think that as far as the BFA is just a typical, BFA. Now you still take 19 hours of free electives, so you can still explore other areas of what the university has to offer and academic pursuits there. But the BS is just a little more focused in what those outside efforts are, what those outside academic pursuits are going to be.
And do any of those students get a double major, or is that still unrealistic with the
Every
COVID?
once in a while, it depends on how many hours they bring in with them. We've certainly had, design and technology majors who will take an extra year and pick up an engineering degree while they're here, which is pretty amazing. I did have one of my favorites I had an actor who not too long ago had an undergraduate degree in acting with a minor in physics, and then went on to do his MFA at Juilliard. So like the physics, he's just like, I just really like physics. And you're like, okay.
It's hard to make that as an argument if you're going to use that on stage. You can say
Right.
history. You can say, I'm like, how am I going to use physics on stage?
Yeah, one of my favorite examples that one time was one of our actors, Stephen Plunkett, was in War Horse on Broadway, and I remember going to see him, and he was playing a German officer, and I was thinking to myself, I'm sitting here, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm the only person in this room who knows that he has a minor in German, right? Even as an excellent actor, he's an NYU MFA grad after Evansville. And so he got the role because he was a good actor, but he also might have gotten that role because he understood the German.
A little more comfort. That's so funny. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about, you mentioned the capstone project. I'd love to talk, and you also mentioned the kind of senior year auditioning class, just how you prepare the students for the launch into the business. And then what does that look like, as we enter senior year and then beyond, in terms of trying to find representation and trying to figure out, sort of how I'm going to live professionally in this world.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really important is something that we really emphasize here, and that I have made definitely as chair, something that I want to really make possible is for my faculty to continue to be able to work professionally, even though here we are located in Southern Indiana. So again, I'll use Professor McLean as an example. She is here. She's still a working actor. She was in The Play That Goes Wrong on Broadway and left that play to come and take this job position with the understanding that she was going to continue to audition and things like that. And so, post-COVID, well, not post-COVID, mid-COVID, really, she went and got herself cast in To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway. And we also had then Erin Willamy, who was in that show. So we had two alums in that show. And she came to me and she said, if I'm not going to go back to New York and do a Broadway play by Aaron Sorkin, directed by Bartlett Sher, like, what am I going to go back to New York to do? And so she went back and, got to be a part of that kind of historic reopening of Broadway. And so when she came back, she said, what is really great and about our plan that we have here is that I am now going to teach audition techniques class completely different than I did before I left, right? Because so much of it is changing in our landscape. And it's so great to have faculty who can be like, no, this is how auditioning is happening in the industry today, as opposed to, well, when I left the industry 15 years ago, this is how we did it, right? And so having actors and actor professors, design professors that are able to help students navigate the here and now is really important. So this next semester, as a matter of fact, Amelia is going to teach the first half of the semester in audition techniques, right? And getting students ready for whatever they choose is next, whether that is going into graduate school. If so, you're going to have your 15 monologues from different periods and all of that ready to go. Or, here's how you do cold auditions. Here's how you do, cold reads. Here's how you submit yourself to casting directors. And then the second part of that, she's actually going to be back in New York. And so the entire second half she will do on Zoom with students, because it's all going to be about self-tape anyway. So then they're going to be watching and reviewing and things like that. So that's really kind of how, and we bring in financial advisors to help students understand how they're going to navigate, paying off loans, if you will, and taxes for the artist and things like that. So getting them ready again for whatever they decide is next. Empowering them to go and be able to be comfortable submitting themselves. And
Totally makes sense. And do you do anything beyond the capstone project, which is great? They're going to have their own work that they could perform, it seems like, in New York, Chicago, LA, wherever they end up. Some of these other cities we talk about too. But anything in terms of, the connections, like, some schools do a showcase, some schools do a digital, recording of them. Anything in terms of what they're going to hold on to, of how they're going to meet casting directors, meet agents, that kind of stuff as
yeah,
they
we
begin
don't do
their
a
professional
showcase.
career.
And we just have found that, enough casting directors have said to us, we really don't go to them as much. We go to the kind of the big 3 or 4, and then we kind of wait to see who comes to New York and see who does what in the first year kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so we've kind of, and it's really, showcases are super expensive, both for the student and the university. And so we kind of set that aside. I will say that one of our key things is alumni.
Mm-hmm.
We have a really great alumni um, network out in both New York, Chicago, and LA, and we do events every year so that people can meet kind of their predecessors. When we first started doing it, I always thought, oh, great, the 80s kids are going to be over here and the 90s kids are going to be over here. But that is absolutely not the case. What happens is people come in and they say to me, like, where are the babies? Who are the new people in town? And they really want to meet the new students or the new graduates. And I mean, I've seen jobs happen in the room where somebody's like, oh, well, you know what? I'm working on this new play reading and we're looking for someone to read stage directions. And why don't you come and do that? And that'll get you in front of this casting director.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear stories all the time of, an alum reading a script and then saying, this isn't right for me, but I think I know who it's right for, and calling the producer and saying, I've got somebody I want you to read. And so our alumni network is really, really important that way. We have an alumni mentoring program where, we try to assign every alum with an alum and to
Mm-hmm.
kind of help navigate through that first year of wherever they're going to be. And again, no matter where they're going to be in the country. So someone's going to be in LA, we'll kind of hook them up with somebody in LA or things like that.
I love it. And I couldn't agree more. Maybe 4 or 5 episodes ago, we did a long thing on showcases of just sort of, yeah, that if you're just another school throwing out another showcase, like, is it realistically something that people are being attended, but is attended by the right people? Are they actually
Right.
getting the kind of jobs that people think they're going to get out of them? I think it was a sort of, fad is the wrong word, but boy, they started springing up and every school was adding them. And
For
it didn't
sure.
mean that casting directors were going to every single
Yeah,
one of those
one of the
showcases.
things that Professor McLean always says too is like, I want to get them ready in that audition class so that they're ready for whatever the next part of auditioning looks like. And I certainly don't want them to pin their hopes
Right.
on something that happens in 10 minutes in a bar in a basement in New
Mm-hmm.
York City,
It's not a bar. No, we can't do showcases in a bar.
You know what I mean? And she's like,
Yeah.
so, she said, I always think a good question that people should ask is like, well, what happens next? Like, what if I don't get representation?
That's right.
Then how am I prepared to navigate what's next?
Well, it's so true. And even, even if you have a great showcase that is attendance, like, what are the steps of, like, how do you walk into an agent's office and interview and talk? There's so much that goes beyond that one,
Right.
8-minute performance or whatever. Let's talk a little bit about your student load in terms of where do they come from? And then you mentioned some different cities that they end up in, but especially as you think about the 32, how many come from the Midwest? How many come from specifically, Indiana? Like, how are you sort of spreading out around the country in terms of where people come from and where they end up?
Yeah, so we have just about 100 students in the program right now. We're still recovering from the COVID years.
Mhm.
Our baby COVID class of 20. But we have right now 27 different states located. Included in that. Indiana is probably our lowest state, actually. We're always kind of like, oh, look, we could take this kid from Indiana.
Mhm.
And so really Texas is our number one state.
Hmm.
I would say that probably 40% of our students come from the state of Texas. It's a big state, but they also do really great theater training in
Mhm.
elementary, middle, and high schools.
Mhm.
Georgia is another big state for us, Colorado, but we have students from California, New Jersey, New York, Vermont, Montana. They come from all over, really. So
Mhm.
again, 27 states, and we've had we've had a student from Greece recently. We have a student from Mexico City. So some international students as well.
Super cool. Well, and then let's talk about cost a little bit. So the internet shows us it's around 40,000 a year without scholarships. How do scholarships work in terms of, I guess what percentage of your students are actually paying that number? How do we work with academic versus artistic versus how do the scholarship process work?
Yeah, so actually 0% are paying paying
We
top
like to hear
dollar, right?
that. We like to hear
So
that.
that's tuition. I would say altogether we're looking at closer to 54,000, including room, board, books, fees,
Right.
everything, right? And so it all starts with the application to the university, and then there's an academic award. I really am proud of Evansville for having really transparency around their academics. You can literally go on our website today and look and see, like, well, if I have a 3.7 and a test score of this, then this is what's going my scholarship range, and so then they apply to the university. They're given an academic scholarship. I add $2,000 to that as a little talent bump.
Mm-hmm.
And then that comes right off the top. So I would say the average scholarship that I'm awarding is about $25,000 to $27,000 a year. And then Evansville also has what are called stackables, which I really love. And that is you come to campus to visit, and that's $1,000 a year scholarship.
Hey.
Visiting campus. You turn in your FAFSA for your financial aid each year. That's another $1,000 a year for that. There's an essays that you can write to get other stackables. And then we also have a really great program. We have a fellow scholar program for Black and Latinx students, and that's a competitive full tuition scholarship that you can apply for in that area. And so we have I think we have four fellow scholars, right? 4 fellow scholars right now, so
Mm-hmm.
about 2 maybe each year. But that's something that's really changed as far as our diversity being here in the Midwest. I mean, Evansville is certainly a primarily white institution, and we have kind of had a mission of bringing in more BIPOC students. And so I'm really proud of the fact that last year's incoming class was 48% BIPOC students, and our incoming class this year is 38%.
Mm-hmm.
And that's of the 30, two that we're wanting. And so we're really excited about that and just the difference that that's making, on our campus in general. And when they graduate, I think there are going to be great opportunities for people.
I love it. And boy, stackable is a great way. It's like a
Stackable fun.
snackable, stackable. I want to, give me 1,000 here, 1,000 there. I love it. The last question I asked about school is just, why do students not choose your school? I know you do a great job of recruiting all over the country. We'll talk about Unifieds a little bit more
Sure.
in the back end of the second half of the podcast. But why do you find it when you accept a student and you're getting down to that 32, they say, hey, I'm actually going to go in this direction instead?
Well, people do go other places. It always makes me mad, but they do. And then I try to get over it pretty quickly and move on. I think they decide that they really do want a specific musical theater degree, and that they really want the dance aspect of it. And that's something, again, that I don't pretend that we have, and I'm okay with that. I think that students decide that they want a larger city than Evansville. Evansville is a little bit larger than it sounds. It's about 170,000 people. And, we have museums and things to do, ball teams, and, all kinds of things to do here. But they decide that they have to have New York City. And yet at the same time, we always say, New York City is going to be there. It's where you're going to go, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be there. So, and I think that's all kinds of different reasons. I mean, they want to be closer to home. We're finding that a little more in recent years, I will say. And I think sometimes, we encourage people to come and see plays. And I don't know. I think there's sometimes where I think students are very worried that they're not sure they really loved being a star in a small pond kind of thing. They want a little more of that as opposed to, I'm going to go run with the big dogs.
Totally makes sense.
To be honest.
I wonder how much of that staying close to home. It's something that I never used to hear. We've been doing this almost 20 years now. And I've never used to hear that from students. Sometimes I'd hear moms and dads say, we'd love if they were within 3 hours of home. And the past couple of years, I hear more students saying, yeah, probably driving distance from home or whatever. And I go, oh my God, I was definitely not my goal as an 18-year-old.
Mine either.
Yeah, I wonder if that reverts back or if that's a true trend.
Yeah, I wonder if it will too. I mean, it's so funny, especially when we talk about how many kids we have from Texas, like, I mean, how they convoy home is,
Hmm.
nobody's traveling alone, and, we do have an airport. You can fly right into Dallas, you can be there in an hour and a half,
Hmm.
So that's kind of interesting too.
All right. Well, let's take a short break, and on the
Okay,
back end, we'll get into auditions for your school, and then, of course, Unifieds, as we
sure.
promised. All right, we are back with Sharla Cowden of the University of Evansville, and we're going to get a little bit into Unifieds, and then, of course, the audition process specifically for Evansville. First off, maybe for the parents out there who kind of have heard Unifieds but don't really know what it is, could we just give a base description of like what is this Unifieds that you help run?
Absolutely. So Unifieds has been around for a little over 30 years now. It was founded by John David Lutz from the University of Evansville, Peter Sargent from Webster University, and Charlie Helfert from Southern Methodist University.
Hmm.
And all of those gentlemen have retired or passed away. And so right now I am the next generation of inheriting the responsibilities of Unified along with Paul Steger, who's co-coordinator at Webster. And the general idea that they had was that let's create a place for a student to be able to travel and audition for multiple universities at one time as, kind of a cost saving measure for the schools, but also for the students. And
Hmm.
so we currently hold auditions in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles. And these 25 schools, they are member schools, and at each of those locations, I will say that there are additional schools that are not
Hmm.
unified schools, but that hold auditions simultaneously with Evans with Unifieds. So it's not a cattle call. So the trickiest part for people to, I think, understand and navigate is that you should go to the Unified Audition School website. You can click on schools there, and then you can check out each of their audition requirements. And then you have to set up an private audition with each of the schools that you want to audition with. And, it's over 2 days in New York, 4 days in Chicago, 2 days in Los Angeles. So there is time for you to audition, maybe for not all 25,
Hmm.
but certainly for 10, if you
Hmm.
wanted to. And then you go that week and you just go in and do private auditions with each of these schools. And so you do have to be really organized in knowing what each school wants when you walk in the door. But it is really convenient. Now, I will also say that, we also have encouraged our unified schools to kind of commit to, as part of our equity, diversity, and inclusion plan, is to commit to some online auditions only, so that if a student cannot travel to one of
Hmm.
those cities, that they still have the opportunity to audition. And I'm pretty sure that all of our schools are adhering to that policy.
I think basically all schools. I mean, I think there's only one school if I remember when I was talking to it, and they were looking at adding it at the time. So it does seem like basically all schools
Mhm.
are keeping virtual auditions
Yeah,
for exactly that reason. For everyone saw an uptick in their auditions during COVID because people could do it. Shockingly, students
mhm,
could do even more auditions
right.
virtually. And so, talk to me about what do you do on the school end of things? One of the things we're often talking about with our students is a little confusing. They're like, "How do I join Unifieds?" You're like, "Well, you don't join Unifieds. The schools join Unifieds, and then you attend and do." But what are you doing? What are you negotiating, or what is sort of your role in helping coordinate the school end of things?
Oh, sure. So, it's like herding cats in a way, a little bit. So we have these 25 schools. I have a waiting list of about another 20 schools that want to be unified schools, but we're
Hmm.
kind of sticking to 25 at a time. And so when a school rolls off, then I go to the wait list and see who wants to kind of move up.
Uh-huh.
And so, as far as coordinating, that's going to be working with. I have a travel agent that I work with, actually, who's Evansville based, who does all of the renting of the audition space, and the hotel space in New York and Los Angeles.
Hmm.
And then I do all of the Chicago negotiating and signing. I just signed the contract for 28, as a matter of fact, for Chicago. So we really plan out there.
Yep.
And, it's they're pretty major contracts. And then, I do the contracts with each of the schools. I do all of the marketing, so placement of ads and things like that for
Mm-hmm.
unified auditions. That's kind of my role, and just making sure that everybody understands what, that they're committing to be in all three of the cities,
Yep.
at least for half a day, that kind of thing.
Well, and I kind of wonder, and of course, only share what you feel comfortable sharing publicly, but like what the experience of when you say herding cats, something that we talk about a lot in this process, like there's no union for, for school, college admissions. And I think so many of these professors, so many of these schools intend to make the process as easy as possible on the students. They want to make it unified, and talk about with the common pre-screen and some of the other things they're trying to do to make it easier. But then there seems to be this competing instinct as more students want to do this, where schools also want to differentiate themselves and go, we are not just a box to be checked, where we're the exact same as all the other schools. So I guess, how do you navigate, ego is maybe the wrong word, but how do you just navigate those competing instincts of trying to make it easiest as possible on the student, but then also the school is saying, we like to do it this way, we like to do it this way.
Yeah, one of the things that is really frustrating me, that frustrating to me, that I try to try to help rein in is, if a school, wants to say, well, we're going to keep students for 4 hours,
Uh-huh.
that's when I have to go and have a talk with the school and say, yeah, this isn't going to work. Like, it's not fair to the students. And I think as long as, our goal is to keep it student centered, then that's really hard to argue with me about,
Yep.
kind of thing. Is this fair to these students who are here, who then, we're going to keep you for 4 hours, and then we're going to, at the end of that time, tell you when you're going to come back this afternoon. So that means that
Uh-huh.
you're going to spend a day just auditioning for our school.
Right.
And that's just not fair. And
Yep.
so figure out a new way, kind of is
Yep.
my answer to that, in a way.
I love that.
But and I understand that, I certainly understand the parents' frustration with not exactly, understanding how it works. And so, in fact, one of the things we're not hoping to do, we're going to do for this year, is to try to put a little more information. Right now, the basic information on the unified website is like, these are the dates where the cities were going to be. Here's how you can get discounted hotel rooms by following these links,
Mm-hmm.
which is really important. But we're going to put some more kind of frequently asked questions section, if you will, and a little bit about the history of it too. So hopefully that'll be a little bit more informative for
I
parents
love it.
out there and students too.
Well, and I love that you mentioned the hangers on. I think that's the other confusing thing for our families, is they're trying to go, as they figure out where to go. Some of these schools will be in some of the cities, but not all of the cities. Some of the schools will go in all three cities, but not participate. They'll be across the street, still doing auditions, which for the family's sake, they're like, well, that still counts for me. I can walk across the street and do an
Right.
audition in
Right.
one city, and there seems to be no way for them to easily see that unified information of going, who are the 25 and then who are the other 30 that are hanging on.
Right. Right. Well, we're going to do, I think we're going to do a different banner, when we can take, and that will certainly list the 25 schools. I think a lot of people have asked me, like, are you going to put on the website other schools that are going to be there, the hangers-on school, if you will,
Right.
that are going to be there, and of course my answer is, well,
The
no,
ones that aren't
because
paying me, the ones
they're
that are
paying
not,
me to do
yes,
some marketing.
give them free
I
advertising.
don't think I'm going to
Absolutely
do
not.
that.
Yeah. Understandable. Totally understandable. Yeah. But it definitely makes the process just that much more confusing. And I think the other thing that makes it more confusing for families, and I wonder how you feel about this, is all these other schools or all these other programs using unifieds in the name. So now there's
Oh,
6 other unified things. I'm like, what's unified?
yeah.
Sometimes people say, which unified should I do? And whether it's Pittsburgh or Moonifieds or Drunifieds or these other, I work at TPAP and they started adding Bluenifieds. I'm like, okay, enough with the Unifieds.
Yeah,
My God.
it drives me batty, but
I know that's how I felt when competitors would like steal our stuff. I'm like, hey, wait a second, I made this.
it
Yeah.
drives me crazy. But I've also decided to, just do what we do and move on with my life.
Yes. And certainly for families out there, if it wasn't clear, that New York, Chicago, and LA, those are the main unified.
Those are the three unified. Those are the
Yes.
three unified audition in which all 25 schools
That's right.
have committed to being in all three locations to make it easier for students to audition for them.
Well said. Anything else we need to get in about unified before we talk about Evansville's audition process?
I don't think so. I do, and there is There's a unified Facebook page. And so, if there are questions, we try to we try to monitor that. And so if there are questions, please feel free to reach out. Or if they're just questions in general, people are welcome to just email me directly at theater@evansville.edu. That's another thing we're going to do. We're going to put a new email on our on the unified website for people to be able to email questions
I
to.
love it. Let me ask maybe one of the probably most frequently asked questions that you'll get a lot. It's not really the time of year right now for people to be asking this question, but the other thing at Unified, the ability not only to do all of your schools that you've applied for, but then also schools will have walk-in auditions, right? So
Oh,
if
right.
I was a family going, wait, what's a walk? I'll walk in for a school. Maybe they had a pre-screen and I can just walk in and do an audition. How does that work? Like, so tell us what a walk-in auditions are sort of
Yeah,
on your.
so I'm going to use Chicago as an example. I think Chicago is probably the most walk-in-able of the sites. And so that's where, a student can be, going around looking, everybody is advertising their school there, and there'll be banners set up and it'll be complete chaos. But, you can just go to the different rooms and ask there'll be a representative outside the door and ask if they're accepting walk-in auditions. And I would say that most schools do have a few slots, and each school will be different. And they will post, we are accepting walk-in auditions, we are not accepting walk-on auditions. And then you kind of ask what they want to see. And, you need to have your package ready. So, you need to make sure you've got your 2 songs that different types of songs and different types of monologues, both classical and contemporary, and contrasting pieces, and then just ask them what they want, and then just be ready to go in and kind of learn. I would say that we accept and get a student every year that is a walk-in audition.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a great way for students to find out about different programs, if you just want to explore, and maybe what I love is that theater is such a big tent, right? And so there is the right program for people out there, and there's been plenty of times where, I have seen a student. This happened just this last year. I saw this student in LA and I really liked him. He just wasn't going to be right for our program,
Uh-huh.
and on his deny letter, whether it made it better or not, I told him that, like, I wrote him a personal note and said, I think you're really talented. I don't think you're right for our program. And if you'd like to discuss other programs that I think would be right for you, here's how you contact me. And we
Mm-hmm.
did. And we had a little Zoom session. And because we are interested in all of these students being able to complete their dreams and find the right place for them. And, I mean, it has been so many times in my life where someone has just like taken someone by the hand and walked them to my room and be like, I just saw this kid. They're not right for us, I don't think. But I told them they should come down here and audition for Evansville,
Uh-huh.
and I do the same thing. I'm like, oh, that's, it, because we, especially with the unified schools, we know each other's programs pretty darn well.
Uh-huh.
And so we're like, oh, I know where you should go audition. And
That's,
we want to make it, we want what's right for the students. That's why we're doing it. That's why we're all doing it.
I love that. Well, and that leads us perfectly into, so in that audition, what are you looking for that would make you go, this student is right for Evansville? So whether it's in the material, whether it's in the interview, or if you give adjustments, what are you looking for in the audition process that makes it a great audition for Evansville?
Yeah. So again, we want them to do really emotional and honest and truthful work. Our audition requirements for performance are, we want to see them do a contemporary monologue, at least 20, 30 lines from a play by Shakespeare, and then at least a verse from a Broadway musical using their own recorded accompaniment. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the basic audition materials. Sometimes Professor McLean will ask for something else. She might she might make an adjustment and see how that goes. And then truthfully, that is one component of it. And then them sitting down in front of us. So we spend 20 minutes with every private audition, and we talk through our program. And then we ask that student about what they want their career to look like, what they want their life as an artist to look like. And we learn a lot from that. I'm interested in learning about their family and how they got involved in the arts and why they want to pursue this profession.
Mm-hmm.
And I learn as much about their potential as an artist in that interview as I do from just watching, a very well prepared um, audition piece.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that, sometimes if an audition is really slick, sometimes I think, huh, is that it? Is that all? Is that
Mm-hmm.
all you get? Is that all you've got for us? Or how are you peaking in this audition? So we're really looking for potential, right?
Uh-huh.
Potential for growth. Um, I want people leaning forward. Like I want them leaning forward in every class that we
Mm-hmm.
do, once they get here. And so how curious are they about us? And about kind of life in general.
Yep. I'd love to just hear about, because you're not the only acting school that will ask for a song. What are you looking for in the song? Maybe especially from some performer has an amazing voice, great, and they're really a musical theater performer. But let's say I'm an actor who's not an actor who thinks of themselves as a singer, but someone who goes, oh God, okay, I'm really only looking at acting schools, and I had to learn this song for you and maybe a couple of the schools that asked me to sing. What are you hoping to see in that non-singer who's applying for acting
A
schools?
little bit of fearlessness, right? A little bit of like, okay, this is the job you've asked me to do, and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
do it. There's going to be a play someday where your character simply needs to sing along to the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need you to be comfortable doing that on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this is where my voice is now, but that's kind of when I want to come to school. We have a lot of students who aren't planning on being musical theater stars, but know they want to work on their voice, and we'll take voice lessons as well. But as far as our season goes, let me throw this in. We do a musical every year, and we do a
Mm-hmm.
very high level. We do a lot of Sondheim around here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, last year we did Cabaret. Next year we're doing Rent. And so, but we've done Into the Woods. I mean, it goes on and on. And so, we have a lot of students who maybe don't even know that they can sing yet because
Mm-hmm.
they haven't had the opportunity, and they get a lot better while they're here, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we kind of ask them for that, just a fearlessness a little bit.
I love that. And then you also mentioned those slick auditions, which I think, is a lot of students fear. They've heard enough of going, oh, you don't want it to be shellacked. You don't want it to be overly coached or feel like it's like, this is what I'm doing and I'm stuck in my ways. If someone walks in with that kind of audition, what would you do? Or if you're giving them adjustments in the 20 minutes, what would you be investigating in a student's slick audition to say, have they peaked or not peaked yet?
Yeah, I think that's when Ms. McLean would ask to see see something else, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what else do you have? And then maybe have them do it, sitting down or sitting on their hands or whatever
Mm-hmm.
else it is. And just taking the note. Can they take the note? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And is it different, or is it so rehearsed that there is no way that they've got it so in their body that that's just how they're going to do it no matter what?
Totally. And then on the academic side, because you said you do look at academics as well, how is that? Is that happening mostly on the Office of Admissions? Are you looking at things like their grades and their SATs? Are you reading their essays? How does that work in terms of like the academic submission and how you're interacting with it?
Yeah, no, we look at all of it, for sure. And so, before they come in the room, they'll fill out what we refer to as a theater interest card, and that tells us a little bit more about them. So they self-proclaim their GPA and things like that. Then
Mm-hmm.
once they apply to the university, then we have a little bit more solid information. We are a test optional school though, so there's some times when I won't know their test scores, and that's fine with me. I can look at their transcript. I can, but that's also part of the interview. I want a student who can sit down and say to me, here's what happened to me in my first year of high school, and here's
Mm-hmm.
how I tried to recover from it. And this is why my GPA, you can see it got better every year. But
Mm-hmm.
we're interested in learning about them as a person and hear how they have, been very proactive about walking towards the problem in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
and how they have overcome that and persevered, if you will. And so
Mm-hmm.
we do look at all of it. We do look at all of it. I will say that our average GPA in the program of incoming students is probably about a 3.7 into the program. And
Mm-hmm.
so that doesn't mean everybody has that. I really don't look at anybody that has under a 3.0.
Mm-hmm.
So
And then when you're looking at, so if you look at things like their essays or their letters of recommendation, what are you reading for? What are you sniffing for if you're sort of combing through those?
I keep going back to curiosity. People who are unapologetic for their ambition and for how curious they are about pursuing different, both academic subjects and areas within the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really what we're looking for. And those the counselors, when they talk about they've been involved in student government. They've been involved in, creating an LGBTQIA plus club on campus, and or whatever it is. It tells me like, oh no, this person is ready to lead and play an active role in their community. And so Evansville is what's called a change maker campus. So I'll explain that really briefly here. So there's this organization called Ashoka U, who's designated fewer than 50 universities in the entire world. So not just the country, but the entire world, where they believe that their students and faculty are making a difference in social justice and civic-based initiatives. And so they can come to campus and take a series of change lab classes. So there's a curious student, they could take on a class on bee pollination, build a native plant garden on campus. There was one on an audio engineering that a lot of our design tech students took. And then one of the ways that theater participates is through our Rogue and Peasant Aces. We are the Evansville Aces, and so we found that little Shakespeare quote there. And so that is our touring group that goes and does free performances for elementary, middle, and high school students in rural areas, kind of introducing live theater. And that's kind of one of the ways that we are trying to be change makers in our own community.
So cool. My last question about the audition is just, as you're thinking about filling out a class, and you mentioned really now being conscious of racial diversity is something that you're really trying to think about. Are you thinking about stuff like gender balance and height and size and geographic balance? Is that all stuff that's factoring in?
It's really not.
You're not really.
We're really not thinking about that.
Well, I guess how do these factors of, as you're putting together a 32, and you mentioned even also some of the degrees, you go, I'm looking for about 16 that are going to be performers, about, how does that work with initial offers and waitlist movement? So, knowing you're not going to get 100% of the people you say yes to.
Right.
How does that work in terms of the way you think about those slots and the way that are you giving it rolling yeses? How are you thinking about putting together the 32, knowing that you don't have complete control over their yes either?
Okay, well, now this is kind of a wacky answer, but as I said, the University of Evansville mascot is Ace Purple, and we are the Aces, but Ace Purple is a riverboat gambler, if you will, because we sit here on the Ohio River. So really, we are gamblers, right? And so we kind of over the years have perfected a little number here, and boy, it has changed though. It changes, and we're still figuring out the kind of post-COVID ideal number here to accept. So we'll probably let's think about those 32. We'll probably accept 80 students to get 32, right? And then then they have to apply to the university and things like that. So we used to say we're going to take 10 men and 8 women. We used to do 18 actors, 10 men and 8 women. And then we just got rid of the whole gender thing. And so now we're just looking for 16. And sometimes we'll have a really heavy first year male class, in fact, our incoming class of performance majors, I think there are 10 men and 6 women. And so that kind of balanced out, but sometimes we'll be a little more female heavy, as I said, our baby COVID class, there's only a couple of males in that class kind of thing. And so it just all works out, then that goes into season plan, that falls back on us and goes into season planning. And we look at who we have and try to go from there and make sure everybody's getting an opportunity to do what they came here to do.
I love that answer. I think maybe wacky, but I think it's honest and illuminative in terms of, I think there's basically, you either do it that way or you have these predestined, very controlled slots, which I think has its own problems with it. There's either it's going to be a risky, gambly way of going, let's see how it goes, or there's the overly controlled. It's not easy. I do not envy that job of trying to get those classes exactly right. Just a few more total questions. I'd love to, you mentioned some of the changes you've made over the past 5 years, sort of looking back at pre-COVID and then now as we move forward, post-COVID world. You mentioned some of the changes with equity and inclusion and some things like that. What else has the school done and, toward the virtual world, toward what changes have you made over the last 5 years and sort of how are you moving forward in 2023?
Yeah, well, I will say that we paid really strong attention to the We See You White American Theater document that was published. And so we no longer do 10 out of 12 work days. We do 6-day rehearsals. We have not gone to a 5-day yet. We do 6 days. But we do try to give, a Saturday night and then all day Sunday is pretty sacred, off around here. And then, once in a while there'll be a Saturday work call, but it's certainly not every Saturday, if you will. We also cut back one of our shows that we're doing. And so on the main stage now, Shanklin Theater, it's a 482 seat, really deep thrust stage. And we do one musical every year. We do one classical every year, usually Shakespeare. Last year we did Measure for Measure, but this year we're doing Chekhov's The Seagull. And then we do one other play. So last year we did Noises Off, which was a huge hit because it's one of the funniest plays ever written. But this year we're doing Clifford Odets' Waiting for Lefty to kind of round out that season. And then we have 2 student directed, we have a May Studio Theater is our second space, and we do 2 student directed pieces in there. And so students take directing in their junior year. They want to direct on the main stage. On the May, they make application, and then we give them a full complement of scenic, costume, lighting, sound designer, budget, everything. And they mount a full length production in there. And so that's a total of 5 shows a year, plus our traveling troupe of the Rogan Peasant Aces. So we're giving enough opportunities for people to get experiences, which is why they came here. But at the same time, we did cut back one show post-COVID there. The other thing I will say is the impetus of allowing our faculty to work. And so sometimes that means that, we're hiring guest artists to come in for half a semester or 4 weeks and things like that. So one of the really exciting things about that is, the students are getting an opportunity to work with different people and make more professional connections in the field. I think, those are real changes that have resulted in paying a lot more attention to students' mental health. I am a big believer in that. I've said that one of our new goals here is that we are going to normalize taking time. And so if a student is having a real mental health crisis, I want them to go away for a semester and get it under control, and then come back when they are able to really give 100% and get 100%, and their space, and to guarantee that their space will be waiting for them.
I love it. Let's just wrap with any advice to the parents out there. So we have many, many parent listeners who are listening for their children, which as a parent of a young child, I'm trying not to do everything for my children, but we appreciate you parents who are doing that. For our parent listeners who may be going through this process and they got a child who's a junior about to graduate from junior year, maybe just about to be a senior, what would the advice be for them as they embark on this process and in terms of how they can best help their child?
Yeah, I think that, helping some of that navigating of exploring all of the different programs available and helping them expand kind of, where have they gotten the information about what kind of programs are right for them, right? And then encouraging them to kind of expand their worldview a little bit. Again, not hitching your wagon to one star. Like if I don't get in there, I'm not even going to college, kind of thing. So I think helping them and having real conversations with them about, getting down to why this school, why, and then just kind of letting it be up to them to make that final decision. I've had a couple, you talked about why students don't go here. I've had students who have really wanted to come here, but their parent, stood in their way kind of thing. And it wasn't for cost or even too close to home. They wanted them to do something different. They wanted them in a different program. And I think just really listening to your child about, or your student as a teacher, if you're providing guidance in that way about what it is they feel. I always say, come to campus, take a tour.
You get $1,000 out of it.
Theater students, spend the night here, see a play, sit in a rehearsal, and then it will either feel like where you want to make your artistic home or it won't. And either way is okay, because we're just going to, Evansville, we're just going to do what we do really well. And we're going to, again, gamble on the fact that the right people will come and join our program. And if we're not the right place for you, that's okay too. But visiting And I know it can get expensive, but visiting and seeing a production or sitting in on a rehearsal and attending classes are really important. And how you feel welcomed. If you go to visit a campus and like no one from theater was available to meet with you, I don't know. That seems a little suspect to me. Like, is that really where you want to be, kind of thing? So I think that personal attention when you go to a campus is really important.
Totally agree. If people want to check out more on Evansville, where should they go? Where do we like social media? Do we like website? They're
Yeah.
emailing you all personally?
So our website, just evansville.edu. It's got the Amazon show, the college tour. There's a video on there where they came and visited campus, and our national recruitment view book is on there as well for this next year. We just started at the International Thespian Festival, so we're just back from that. So we've already seen 640 auditions this year, and we'll just keep moving forward here. I would say Instagram is probably our best place. We're rolling out our first year class on Instagram. That is student run. And so we try to really kind of give you a day in the life of an Evansville student when class is in session there. And then Facebook is really about current shows that are happening and what some of our alums are out doing. So, and that is at UE Theater on both of those platforms.
I love it. And we will we'll put those in the show notes so people can easily find that. Sharla, thanks so much for the time today. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hey now, I hope you enjoyed listening to that episode with Sharla. My audio quality may have been poor, but the content was wealthy. Really a number of different takeaways we could have done for this one. I'm going to leave all of the unified stuff since it's so specific to that time of year, and we do multiple webinars with MTCA diving deep into the strategy and all the aspects of each unified, including walk-ins and some of the great stuff we chatted about today. So I'm going to hold those for that. I'll just do a couple shorter takeaways from some of the other stuff we talked about today. Of course, I co-sponsor Sharla's statement on not getting hung up about the letters on the degree, whether that's BFA, BA, BM, BS, BHA, and any of the other combinations of letters you can hear. It's much more about the content of what you're learning than the letters that end up on the degree. We've seen that with a few schools that offer the BFA, BM distinction. You'll see that coming up with Florida State in a few weeks. But I do think Evansville is interesting in that you get accepted before you have to decide which track you're on for BFA or BS. That's, I think, kind of unique. It's always interesting for students to try to determine what level of credit hour focus they want to spend on performance. I know we've talked about that in a couple different takeaways. How do you know for sure at 17? And I do think for the more polarized students, it's a bit easier, right? If you know you only want to study performance and any credit toward any other aspect of theater or any kind of academics is going to feel like a wasted class that you're just going to be rehearsing your lines in, then yes, your list should have a lot of BFA conservatories on it. On the other end of the spectrum, there are people who know they want double majors and the theater is just one of many things they want to study in a given week. And they know that they're going to have some audition-based BA programs on the list, maybe some non-audition BAs, and perhaps even a few of those liberal arts heavy BFA programs that allow double majoring. That would be maybe their extreme end of performance, where for some people that would be the extreme end of academics for them. But I do think a lot of students live in that world where they know they love theater, but they aren't sure exactly how narrow to focus the telescope on it. And I think Evansville's a great example of a program where you'll still get some conservatory-like training, but they're going to ask you to learn about and around theater as well. That study abroad program where you get discouraged from taking theater, I think is really interesting, as is sharing a cohort with other theater makers who are not performers themselves. Both them being in your performance classes and you having that environmental aspect of learning other ropes alongside performing. And that's not to say that heavy conservatory style programs won't have you do some of that. I mean, you take crew or you take other classes in the about theater category, like theater history or directing, etc. But it's always interesting how much programs focus on the learning about theater versus hours devoted to the craft of performance itself. I don't think there's a right balance universally, but each student is going to have to feel out what feels right for them, and it may change. For some, the yoga, acting, voice, movement, dinner break, back for a show kind of schedule is really terrifying, and some that's exactly what they're looking for. But I just think it's one of the biggest questions you're going to continue to wrestle with as this process goes, and it really should help determine the shape of your list. How much dramaturgy and lighting design would you want compared to an additional performance class? How little academics would perhaps make you feel uncomfortable or make you feel robbed of the college experience? That is for you to determine for yourself. The other thing I just want to make sure I mentioned, and this was not specific to Sharla for sure. Many of our guests have said things like this. She just happened to say it twice. So I'm going to make sure to point it out just so you get my thoughts on it. Is the idea of the number one program in the country. I think she actually mentioned two different programs. It was the study abroad, and then it was another one of, I think it was theater management was the other one. Here, you could substitute the word number one for almost any kind of quantifying phrase. So top 5, top 10, best, etc. Whenever I hear that, I would just basically immediately ignore it because it's always just like, says who? I'm sure you've heard me rail against those top 10 lists when you see them on playbill.com or wherever. And this is not shade at playbill.com. I think they've been a sponsor of the podcast. But I find them just infuriating, right? By what metrics are these the top 10 or the top 20 or whatever, right? They're normally written by a 23-year-old intern right out of school who's trying to get some clicks. And somehow their program always ends up high on the list, whatever program they went to, right? Regardless of what school that is. And then what do they go by? Number of total people on Broadway? I mean, some schools graduate 400 students a year and some 12, right? Are you doing the math to make it per capita? I know you're not. Hint. Are you combining these schools' graduate acting programs with undergraduate musical theater programs? How does that make sense? Are you factoring in years of existence? And if so, is that a positive or a negative? Should Carnegie Mellon get credit for actors who could be my grandfather? Do I get Ted Danson when you're stacked against programs that may be 10 years old and still building their alumni network? And if so, how would you calculate that, right? I think there are enough problems with the way we kind of rank colleges and universities in general. When you look at something like the U.S. News World Report, all the way those schools try to juice the algorithm and up themselves in the rankings. There's a great, not to recommend another podcast, but Malcolm Gladwell does a great podcast on this for Columbia. It was a Columbia specific, the way they juiced the rankings. But I will also say, when we talk about this for theater and musical theater programs, there's not some big sophisticated algorithm they're using. It is almost always a subjective judgment, and often not by someone whose subjective judgment you would want to respect. Again, I think if a big casting director or director said, here are 5 schools I really love the graduates from, I wouldn't take that list as gospel, but I think that's a subjective opinion that would hold some weight for me. I'd add that a little bit of weight. But that is not the case in most of these sort of listicle BuzzFeed style articles that are written by 23-year-olds who mostly are just regurgitating what they've heard before or that they've seen before. Okay, I could go on for 30 minutes on these top 10 lists, but I'll hold myself back and just say, when I hear someone say number 1 or top 5 about anything artistic and subjective like this, I just take it with a huge, huge grain of salt. Does it mean it's probably a pretty good program if someone gave them that title? Sure. Right? It would take some audacity for someone to completely make that up. But in the same way, if I said Tom Hanks is the number 1 actor in the world, you could dispute it. It probably means I think he's a pretty good actor. But you could certainly say, I think someone else is, or I think this. Or you could certainly say, why do you say that? By what metric is he the number 1 actor in the world? And I think that's true of any of these kind of artistic rankings. And the last thing I want to say, speaking of grad schools, is what Sharla said about their pipeline to some of these great grad programs. We haven't had that many schools that mention this specifically, since in general, a BFA in musical theater might be more likely to be considered a terminal degree. But with non-MT actors, that is a very normal path that you might get a BA or a BS or even a BFA in theater/acting and then go on to an MFA. Sharla mentioned some of their people who ended up at NYU and Juilliard MFA. Those are both fantastic programs. Top 5 in my estimation. No, that's a joke. Before you call me hypocritical, that was a joke. But just for those who are out there looking right at acting programs and trying to make that difficult decision of how much do you specialize that we were talking about, right? How fine do I want to make my Bachelor of Fine Arts? I just want to throw that out for you to consider. You could go to a Carnegie Mellon or a Juilliard or a North Carolina School of the Arts, pick any of those kind of conservatory style BFA programs where you're going to get a very specialized terminal degree. Or you could go to some broader focused theater education and then decide if you want to continue on with that specialization in an MFA in acting or go in a different direction, as Sharla did. Definitely a well-trod path to take in the acting world, though it is a little bit more rare in the musical theater world. Not completely unheard of for an MT to get an MFA, especially maybe if you think you want to teach, but there are not a lot of those programs. There are some, but there are not a lot. Okay, that's enough takeaway. Enough of this particular episode of Mapping the College Edition, which continues to be produced by Meghan Cordier. You can follow us at Mapping the College Edition on Instagram. You can like us, subscribe to us, review us as you so desire, and check us out on our website at mtcollegeeditions.com or mtca.nyc if you like typing fewer letters. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, are we your number one podcast in your feed? Let us know. We'll see you next week.